of government God wanted man to be. Now this is going to be a shock to you. In the United States, there is a concept that is not supported by the Constitution, but it is accepted in the mindset of the American psyche, and that is the separation of church and state. In the Bahamas, I believe there are some who would like to develop that idea, and I warn them, not as long as I'm alive. God has no concept really about the separation of church and state. It's not in God's concept. Matter of fact, when God created Adam, Adam was both church and state in one body. Church is the spiritual representative, and government is the royal, kingly, administrative representative. Let me explain that to you with a couple of statements. God's original purpose was for each human to be a king and a priest. Now this is very important, because you see, we keep pushing them apart to the point where we have accepted that it's not good for a Christian, quote unquote, to be involved in politics. And we got people standing in the pulpits of Christian churches preaching against believers getting involved in politics, because the concept has been sowed by the devil in our minds that you cannot be both. Well, I have come to destroy that today, and I'm going to show you in the scriptures that it is destroyed. It was never God's plan. Secondly, let's talk about what the two words mean. The word king means ruler. The ruler is the executive branch of a government. Very important word. And a ruler, or the king, deals with rights. Everybody say rights. Say it again, rights. Write that down. So a king is the executive branch of government. The executive branch of any government is the branch that deals with executing government legislation. They carry out the government dictates. For example, in our country, we have a governor and a prime minister. In the United States, they only have a president. In Great Britain, they have a queen and a prime minister. Now, keep in mind that the government structure of Europe grew out of the Roman structure under which Christ was born. The king deals with the administration side of government. The king. The word for king is the word ruler. Ruler. Write that down somewhere, ruler. The word king is the same word as ruler in the Hebrew and the Greek language. Now this is important, because the Bible says, and God created man and said unto him, what? Have dominion. Now if you got another translation, you see the word ruler over the earth. So Adam was created to be a ruler or a dominator of the earth. He was created to be the executive of the earth, to execute God's government purposes in the earth. Adam therefore was the king of the earth, and his children are all kings of the earth. I'm going to prove that in a minute. God wanted you to be king, but that's your executive responsibility. That's the part where you execute judgment on the earth on behalf of God. That is where you give the rights to the earth that God intended. So kings deal with rights. Rights. A right is a judgment based on law. So man was given the assignment by God to rule earth and to execute God's righteous judgment on earth. That means to give the earth what it rightfully is by God. Now the next point is priests. What is a priest? Interesting. The priest is the spiritual branch of God's government. The word priest means representative of God. Now both of these are representatives. The priest is the spiritual branch, and the priest deals with righteousness. Two important concepts to clear. What does the king deal with? Say it loud. Come on, saints, say it loud. Come on, citizens, say it loud. A little louder. Say it for the TV audience. It's important. A king deals with what? Rights. What does a priest deal with? Righteousness. Two different things. The priest deals with relationship. The king deals with power, executing judgment. So the priest branch deals with staying in relationship with the government. The king deals with executing the rights of a government. Now, I will ask you a question. Which one are you? Priest or king? Well, y'all getting smart already. You cannot represent God if you are not in right relationship with God. It's impossible for you to be a priest without being a kingly spirit at the same time. Now remember, we got to remember something here. God had some problems with his program. Genesis 3. The program got a little bit distorted. But in the Garden of Eden, God had a man and a woman who was walking in Eden. What is Eden? The very presence of God. So they were priests. And their job was to what? Protect the relationship. To guard that environment. So your job as a priest is to make sure that you stay in right positioning with God. The word righteousness means right positioning. It doesn't mean to wear long dress and hats and no earrings and look ugly. The word righteous simply means right positioning, right standing with an authority. That's what it means. Righteousness means what? Right standing with an authority. The right relationship with an authority. That's all it means. So don't make it deep. The priest's job is to make sure that you stay in right relationship with God. That's why the priests in the Old Testament had a tough job. They had to kill a lot of animals and spill blood and try and get into this private place called the Holy of Holies. Why? That's where God was. And there was a curtain that separated them from that presence. And they had to do all this ritual just to get in that spot. When they got in there, if they made it in safely, then the power of God communed with the whole community through that person. And the nation was blessed. So the priest is to get the relationship back with God restored. The king is to execute judgment, or to do what God says after you are in relationship with God. Let's see a couple of comments here. I found this. Exodus chapter 19, verse 6, 5 and 6. Moses brought the group of people out of Egypt. I want to talk about them for a moment, because it's important to understand why God created the priesthood in the children of Israel. Boy, how do I explain this in a short, brief way? Okay. Adam had no priest because he was priest. Adam had no king because he was king. He was priest in the presence of God and king dominating the earth. It was all in one body. Then the Bible says God blessed them, male and female. So a woman is a priest and a queen. A queen is the other side of the king with the same authority, executing the rights based on relationship. In chapter 3, we know that something happened. They disobeyed their authority, and therefore they cut off relationship with their authority. So now we have a king who is not in touch with his government. We now have a priest who was broken off right standing with his government. So now he becomes unrighteous and dominated rather than dominating. So a sinner is really a king who have lost his authority and a priest who have lost his position. That's what a sinner is. It's a king without authority and a priest out of position. That's a sinner. The word sin doesn't mean to lie, steal, curse, commit adultery. The word sin in the Hebrew language means to rebel against authority. That's what the Hebrew word means, to rebel against the known will of God. The word sin means rebellion. It doesn't mean all the stuff we call it. These are the results of that rebellion. But the act of breaking off relationship is what sin is. Now, I got to ask you to follow me, because if you understand this, you can teach for the rest of your life. You will have sense for the rest of your life. Listen to me now. It took me 20 years to figure this out. You can get it in 20 seconds. Here it is. God's plan was to create one nation. Nation called mankind. God only has one race on his mind. Human race. There's no black race, red race. There's just one race, human race. From one man, God made all the ethnos of men. God's plan was to, through that one group of massive humanity, to rule the earth. One group. Spread all over the earth and execute his will, his judgment on the earth. That's what God intended. That group cut off relationship with God. So now God has to come up with another plan. So God makes a promise. He said, tell you what, I'm going to send someone back a little later to restore you, a seed. In the meantime, I'm going to set up a program where I can still be in touch with you guys. So if you read the book of, the Old Testament, you'll find this. When Adam sinned, God saw the sin rising so high, he decided to check it. So he sent a flood. The flood wiped out all of the sin and the sinners and all the stuff that was going on, and God saved a family of 8 people. In that family, God said, let's start again, Noah, because you fear me. I'm starting with a righteous man now. So God begins to repopulate the earth through this man called Noah and his 3 sons. His 3 sons then become great nations. Those nations began to call upon the name of the Lord again. And then they began to get involved in paganism, heathenism, and all kinds of devilish and demonic activities. You would recall that God gave a warning to them that he would not destroy them with water anymore, but he'll bring judgment. Then we find out that God begins to develop this family through Abraham. And he says, Abraham, tell you what, I'm going to reduce this to one man first. I'm going to have a kid through you. The kid's going to have kids, and the kids who are going to have the kids come from a nation. This nation will be my representative to all the nations of the world. This whole nation right here. I'm going to call this nation the Hebrews. So Abraham has this son who has a son who has 12 sons, Jacob. Jacob's 12 sons are called the Israelites, sons of Israel. Remember that Isaac's name was, Jacob's name was changed rather to Israel. Israel had 12 sons, so they were called the nation of Israel, the 12 sons of Israel. God said, this nation, I'm going to use them, watch this, to bring the other nations back to me. I will be your God, you will be my people, you will represent me, you will be my ambassadors to the other nations. This nation got excited and began to rebel against God because it went to their heads. God sent this nation into what? Slavery. So they ended up in Egypt, dominated by a massive African civilization called the Pharaohs. They were now in bondage for 430 years. And then God says, I'm going to go and get them now. I think they learned their lesson. He raised up a man called Moses, called him in, sent him in there. He got them out, almost 1 million of them, and they went to the desert, and the first thing God said to them was what? I bring you here to worship me. What's that? Priestly responsibility. I want you to get back in fellowship with me. Then he says, I will be your God, and you will be my people. Talking to a whole nation. Now, I want to read what he says to them. In Exodus, they are in the desert, almost 1 million of them. Let's read what it says together. Verse 5. although the whole earth is mine, you, the nation, will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Interesting. These are the words you are to speak to who? The whole nation. He said you would be what? A kingdom of priests. Now those two